My name is Ellen Kokinda. I am opening the staff hearing officer meeting for November 17th, 2021. Let's jump right into preliminary matters. And A is requests for continuances, withdrawals, postponements, or addition of X agenda items. I do not have any requests of those kinds. So I'll move on to announcements and appeals. There are no appeals, and the only announcement that I'd like to make is that the city will be, all of our boards and commission hearings will be transitioning to Zoom. We will no longer be using GoToWebinar starting on December 1st, so we'll be using Zoom, and you can expect more information about that as we transition. So it might look a little bit different, but it'll still have all the same abilities to participate. And then item C are, I'd like to open up public comment for items not on the agenda today. So if anyone wishes to speak on items not on the agenda, you can do so by raising your hand, clicking on the hand icon on your GoToWebinar control panel. Raised hand is indicated by a red arrow pointing down. And I do not see anyone who wishes to speak at this time. So I'm going to go ahead and close public comment for those for preliminary matters. And we can jump right into our first project, which is 742 Juanita Avenue. This is a 9,222 square foot site. It's currently developed with a 1,152 square foot, 3-bedroom single unit residence and a 411 square foot attached garage. The proposed project involves a proposal for a 236 square foot first floor addition and a 475 square foot second floor addition. The proposed total of 2,274 square feet on a 9,222 square foot lot is 65% of the maximum required floor to lot area ratio. The project requires staff hearing officer approval of an interior setback modification to allow the proposed residential addition to encroach into the required 10-foot interior setback. So I'm going to ask Ms. Plummer, who is the staffer for this particular project, if you'd like to go ahead and present, and then we'll open it, I'll ask the applicant to join us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Kokinda, and thanks, Mr. Russell, for going to the project plans. So we'll start on this sheet. The project before you today is 742 Juanita Avenue. The site, as you can currently see, is developed with a single unit residence and an attached garage. And the proposed project involves a addition to the first floor and a new second floor addition. The project is 65% of the maximum required floor to lot area ratio as shown on the cover sheet. The discretionary application under your jurisdiction this morning is for an interior setback modification. As you can see, a portion of the addition will encroach in the required 10-foot interior setback. And as also that you can see is the lot is irregularly shaped as it progressively narrows towards the rear of the property. The existing house and also the garage is considered non-conforming to the required 30-foot front setback and both 10-foot interior setbacks. And as you can also see, the design that's being proposed generally follows the existing first floor footprint. However, it still will be encroaching into the interior setback. The existing encroachment ranges approximately 10 feet, 8 inches to 6 feet, 1 inch and 3/4, as the property line is not parallel to the residence. And the proposed addition at the very closest point towards the rear is going to be 6 feet. So it just goes a little bit beyond the existing encroachment. Next slide, please. And then, so the top 3 photos are looking out if you're standing on the project site towards the neighborhood, and really the bottom 4 show the subject property. So for context, that is the photos to the left, the those three represent the existing house. And then let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, so to the left, you'll see a section of the house. As if you're standing looking towards 742 Juanita. You can see the existing residence, the proposed addition at the first and second floor. This is also shown on the south elevation. And the one to the left that is viewed from the street. Let's see. And then at the bottom, you can see the floor plans, the first and second floor plans for the proposed project. So it's a minor extension of the existing house. And then the second floor is really to accommodate a new master suite. So the ordinance allows non-conforming additions in the interior setback to occur without a modification being requested. However, they are subject to specific standards, and this project unfortunately did not meet all of those standards. The first of which is applicable to this project is that the minimum setback will not be changed. So as earlier mentioned, the setback of the existing house does range, given that the property line is not completely parallel to the house. And this addition goes a little bit beyond the existing encroachment to 6 feet, which is more than the existing encroachment. In addition, they're also proposing a new second story in the setback. It's worth noting, if you look at the east elevation, if you'll go back to page 3, Mr. Russell, the second floor addition does jog a little bit in from the first floor addition. The architect did study alternative design solutions. However, there are some issues with those alternatives, and I'll let him cover those a little bit more in his presentation. But mostly it relates to floor plan circulation, potential changes to the architectural character of the house, and increased construction costs. The project was also reviewed by the Single Family Design Board on September 13th, and they found the proposed additions aesthetically appropriate and consistent with the neighborhood, and they were comfortable with the aesthetic appropriateness of the setback encroachment. So staff is supportive of the request for the interior setback encroachment. It's found to be a modest improvement to the lot, allowing for a master suite at the second floor and an improved dining room and living room configuration of the first floor. As shown in the elevations, there is a small fixed window. I guess let's look at the south exterior. Yeah, there's a small fixed window at the second floor, which is for a where the bathroom is. And then as well, you can also see towards the right a small balcony. That balcony is outside of the required setback. And as it's facing the rear yard, there's no anticipated noise or privacy issues really associated with that. And that concludes my presentation. If you have any questions, I'll be here throughout the meeting, and then I'll turn it over to Mr. Thompson for his presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Plummer. I appreciate that. And Mr. Thompson, please, if you wouldn't mind joining us. And I welcome you to add comments. I'd be really curious to hear about your considerations for the configuration and how you got to this particular design. And whenever you're ready. Thank you.
Thanks for the opportunity. It's a smallish house, under 1,200 square feet. And the living area, which you can see in the plan here, is particularly tight. The dining room is kind of squeezed up against the kitchen. So the owners want to add to the rear of the house. And if we were to follow that 10-foot setback line, it wouldn't achieve what we're trying to achieve, which is a place for the dining table close to the dining room. If the first floor setback needed to be 1 3/4 inches larger to eliminate that one mod, we could do that. But I don't think that's important. I think this is a modest addition, very low impact on the street, And of course, it comes about because of the city's change in zoning from the 6-foot setback to the 10. We think we have good distance from the other neighbors, been in touch with the 2 adjacent neighbors, and they don't have any objection or any comment. So yeah, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you, Mr. Thompson. And I'm going to transition to public comment, and then if I have questions, I'll be able to invite you back on. But if you don't mind turning your webcam off and muting yourself one more time, sorry, and I'll ask you to come back. Okay, so for this particular project, 742 Juanita Avenue, if you wish to speak, please raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon on your GoToWebinar control panel. A raised hand is indicated by a red arrow pointing down, and you'll have 2 minutes to speak. I do not see anyone at the moment. Ms. Gu, I didn't receive any public comment on this particular item. Can you confirm that we haven't received anything else?
No, we have not received any public comment on this particular item.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, I still don't see any raised hands for this item, so I'm going to go ahead and close public comment. And Mr. Thompson, please come back on. Thank you. So I went out on site. I read the staff report. I went out on site. I was able to look through the SFDB's comments, and generally, you know, what this site, what's actually being proposed is fairly modest. I mean, when I look at an interior setback modification, I'm really concerned about privacy being one of the main issues. I know that with the change in the setback from 6 feet to 10 feet, that meant that it makes it, for existing conditions and existing structure, it's a little bit more awkward in terms of trying to maintain that. And given the irregularity of the parcel and how it kind of narrows towards the back, it could create kind of an awkward design challenge. So I think what you're requesting today is a perfectly reasonable request, and I appreciate the configuration of to try to maintain as much privacy for the neighbor, particularly keeping a fixed window. Anytime I see a 2nd-story window and in a setback, those are the types of things that I'm looking at. So I don't really have any specific questions. Like I said, I went out on site to see kind of what was being proposed. I do think I can go ahead and make the findings for this project that the interior setback modification is consistent with the purposes and intent of our zoning ordinance and is necessary to secure an appropriate improvement on the lot. Like the overall addition is relatively modest. It's minimal, and you're trying to maintain as much privacy between neighbors by keeping that window fixed and not have many the openings that could potentially cause privacy issues. So that is my finding, and I have no other conditions to add to this project. So that is it. And I just need to announce that my decision is appealable. So if anyone does not agree with my decision and wishes to appeal, they need to do so. You need to do so within 10 days. And we have information here on the slide of how you submit an appeal, with 10 calendar days, I should say. And we can go ahead and move on to our next project. Thank you so much, Mr. Thompson.
Thank you.
Okay, give me just a moment here. Okay, so item B on the agenda is 922 Garcia Road. This project consists of a new 1-car garage attached to the east side of the existing 2-story single-unit residence, additions to the first and second stories, a new deck on the rear of the house, and new windows, doors, and roofing. The project requires staff hearing officer approval of an interior setback modification to allow new attached garage to encroach into the interior setback. The environmental analyst has determined that the project is exempt from further environmental review pursuant to California Environmental Quality Act guidelines, section 15301, existing facilities, and 15305, minor alterations and land use limitations. Mr. Baumann, so we have you as the staff representative. If you'd like to go ahead and take us through the project, please.
Okay, good morning, Ms. Gokenda. This house has relatively new ownership, and the owners are proposing to kind of do a pretty thorough remodel of the house, particularly of the interior, and they very much would like to have a garage for parking. As we described in our staff report, we researched the archives for the property, and it wasn't extremely clear what the permitted parking configuration was, but the best as we can determine, there was one uncovered parking space in the driveway. So the project proposes to place a attached one-car garage in the driveway on the east side of the house. And there's just the distance between the existing house and the property line and the setback line makes it such that to fit a garage there with the proper interior dimensions means a little bit of encroachment into the interior setback on the east side. The photographs and the plans try to convey the sloped condition of the lot. Obviously, it's a one-story facade from the front and 2 stories at the back, but it's a little more difficult to see the cross slope going down from east to west. The reason I'm mentioning that is in terms of alternate locations for a garage that wouldn't require the modification. So the west side of the house is really much lower below the street, and it wouldn't be very feasible to try to put in a new driveway and a garage in that area. So the proposed location seems to be the most appropriate place to put a garage. So staff supports the request for the setback encroachment. It's relatively minor, and the house to the east on that side, there's a good bit of landscaping, and also the neighbor's driveway is on this side of the house anyway. So it doesn't seem to be much of an infringement on that neighbor where the setback encroachment would happen. So staff can recommend that the staff hearing officer make the findings to approve the modification, and we don't have any recommended conditions of approval for that. So I think that concludes my presentation.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Mr. Thompson, I know you're the agent for this project as well. If you like to join and follow up on, again, any of your design considerations as you were working on this project. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. As Mr. Baumann said, the west side of the property, which is the only other option for a garage, which is the downside on this site plan, there's a good 7 or 8 foot drop from the street, and building a garage on that side would also block the only windows in the lower floor rooms. So it's not viable at all. Building on this side of the house, as we proposed on the east side, we're only blocking a closet window and a bathroom window. We're essentially reusing the existing driveway location. And as Mr. Baumann said, we're a long distance away from the next house. And of course, there's no noise generated from the interior of this garage. So the owners are very anxious to have a garage. It's one of the only houses on the street without any off-street parking. So that's the request.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. I'm going to ask you to go ahead and turn your webcam off, and I'm going to open it up to public comment. So this is public comment for 922 Garcia Road. If you wish to speak, please raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon on your GoToWebinar control panel. And a raised hand is indicated by a red arrow pointing down. And you'll have 2 minutes to speak once I call on you. And I do not see anyone at the moment. Again, I'm going to ask Ms. Gu if you wouldn't mind coming on, and I hadn't received any public comment on this particular item, and if you could just confirm that nothing else has come in this morning.
No, I have not received any public comment for this particular item. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, still no raised hands. So I'm going to go ahead and close public comment for this item and ask Mr. Thompson to join again. And actually, would you please zoom in a little bit more on the garage, that kind of gray shaded area? And thank you, that's helpful. So I went out on site. Of course, I read the staff report, went out on site, and went through the single family design board's comments. And, you know, you obviously see once you get on site that just from the grade from the street, that the most natural place to have any room to put any kind of covered parking on site is where it's currently proposed, based on that drop off and the slope of how the houses up the street are going. I didn't, you know, this is, again, it's relatively, it's a fairly straightforward project and request. It actually brings the property more into conformance with our zoning ordinance by requiring one. I mean, generally you're required, it's 2 covered parking spaces, but given the kind of a little bit of lack of clarity from the permitted parking configuration, at least this would bring the parking in more into conformance by having 1 covered parking space. And I guess I was just wondering a little bit about just had a question about the trash in the back. So when I went on site, it looked like it might be a little tight with where the proposed wall is, and being able to get the trash around the garage up to the street level. But you're not proposing to do anything with that existing stone wall. Is that correct, Mr. Thompson?
Which wall are you talking about?
The one that runs along the driveway that's near the neighbor's property.
No, you can see that we're going to put a 3-foot walkway that'll require a small retaining wall around the 3 sides of the garage. So you'll be able to roll the trash cans up. I mean, we might revisit that and realize that we need 3.5 feet or something like that. But and this as a retaining wall will be very low.
Okay, yeah, I just was, when I went out on site, I was trying to look at the plans, and it looks like there's plenty of room on the plans, and just trying to see what that would be as when I went out on site. Another thing that I was concerned about just had to do with the historic nature of the surrounding properties, and having checked in not only with staff, but with the urban historian about the neighboring properties, and that she didn't have any concerns about the proposed changes and the location of the garage, and that based on the slope of the property and how the neighboring property is kind of set up, there's a separation between the proposed garage and the adjacent structure, that it wasn't going to be any kind of impact to a historic structure. So similarly to your last project, I can say this is a reasonable request, that I can find that the interior setback modification is consistent with the purposes and intent of the zoning ordinance, and that it's necessary to secure an appropriate improvement on the lot. Like I mentioned, it's bringing this property more into conformance with covered parking. And that the proposed location, given the site, is the most reasonable request, and that you're minimizing grading, and there really are no other alternatives. So I can go ahead and support that. And I agree with staff that I don't see the need to add any conditions to this project. And that is my decision. And I, once again, will note that there's the 10-day appeal period. If anyone wishes to appeal my decision, they may do so by submitting an appeal within 10 calendar days of this meeting. And if if a planning commissioner disagrees as well, they are able to pull that a project too. And that is, we can go ahead and close this item and move on to the next one. Thanks again, Mr. Thompson.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. All right. This is going to be the biggest project of the day. One moment. Let's see here. So this is 469 through 493 West Mountain Drive. This is a 4.59 acre single unit residential zone lot, is developed with 7 dwelling units and various accessory structures, and is non-conforming to residential density and setbacks. The total permitted floor area on the site is 6,079 square feet. Over a period of many years, owners have constructed residential remodels and additions, garage conversions, and accessory structures without permits. The project also proposes some demolition and new construction for a total of 6,290 square feet of floor area requested to be permitted. The project proposes to abate enforcement action for an unpermitted accessory building and residential addition located in a city sewer easement, and comprehensively address all unpermitted improvements on the property. The required discretionary applications under jurisdiction of the staff hearing officer are a lot area modification to permit additional residential floor area on the lot, which is non-conforming to residential density. 2 is an interior setback modification to allow a portion of unpermitted addition to unit 473 to remain and be permitted. And then 3, an alternative open yard design to provide a common open yard area rather than private open yards. And Ms. Baumann, this is also your project. So if you'd like to take us through the considerations and how you all managed to get it to this point at this hearing. So please, whenever you're ready. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Contenda. Like you just said, we're finally at this point of this hearing, but boy, a lot of work has gone into this. It's been a really interesting project to work on because of its uniqueness. And well, staff, prior to the figuring out even what the discretionary applications would be, the applicants submitted a pre-application review team review. Late in 2020, we reviewed that, and the main question in that pre-application review was to figure out how the has-built improvements that have been constructed on the site could be permitted. So we ran through pretty much the entire municipal code, looking at all the options and described in our pre-application letter how they would or wouldn't be applicable or supportable. So we came to the conclusion that a lot area modification would be the most appropriate, given that the site is permitted with 7 dwelling units. And like the first sentence of our staff report says, and the project description says, it's non-conforming to residential density. So we know there are 7 permitted dwelling units on the site. That same sentence says it's non-conforming to setbacks. The as-built work is non-conforming to setbacks, but the original development conformed to the setbacks. So a little bit of clarification there. But over a period of many years, there's been various additions done to the 7 original cottages. All of them had 1-car garages that were attached. All the garages have been converted to living space, and all the units except 1, in addition to the garage conversions, have had additional living space floor area added to them. Also, there's numerous accessory buildings that have been added to the site. And big thanks to the applicant team for doing a lot of the background research of the history of the property and spending a tremendous amount of time, just taking inventory of what's there and getting it all put onto a set of plans. Let's see, so the lot area modification would allow floor area to be added to this non-conforming site in terms of non-conforming to residential density. When a property's non-conforming to density, there's only a very limited ability to add new floor area. So the lot area modification would be the means to allow more than the limitation for 250 square feet on the lot that the municipal code allows. And then maybe a discussion of the interior setback modification. Mr. Russell, if you could zoom in kind of on toward the left side on unit 473 Mountain Drive. That unit had, well, you can see the hatched area at the back of that unit 473 is a large rear addition. And then behind that, there's the dashed area where there was a setback encroachment. So that was all the area of the unpermitted addition to this unit. So the project, well, staff indicated it would be difficult for us to support. Well, while we're saying that, also 469 West Mountain Drive had the same situation of that dashed addition in the northern setback. And staff just found it difficult to say that those additions would be supportable because at the time the additions were built, there was a 15-foot setback requirement. So they just didn't abide by the setback requirement when they built the additions. So the proposal is to remove that entire rear addition to 469 and just the portion of it, the rear addition on 473 that's in the setback. The complication on that is that there's a bearing wall on that addition that supports the whole addition. And basically the thickness of the wall, about 11 inches thick, encroaches into the setback. So staff thought it would be an unreasonable burden to require or to not support leaving that bearing wall with that 11-inch encroachment into the setback. So staff indicated that we could support keeping that small encroachment in order to permit that hatched area to the rear of 473. I think that describes this. We had some consideration. It was difficult when we reviewed this application because it's in a single family residential zone. We had some, I guess, confusion over the course of our review about the applicable development standards, because it seemed that, you know, the project's totally surrounded by single family zoning and single family residential development. So it seemed like we should treat the project as a single family development and use those development standards. But what we found with Title 30, the way under Title 30, a lot of the development standards are based on what kind of development is on the lot rather than the zoning designation. So we found that the parking requirements, for example, are per the fact that there's multi-unit residential development on the lot. So multi-unit residential parking standards apply. That actually benefited the project because they had converted their covered parking to living area and they never did have any replacement covered parking. So basically generally their existing uncovered parking situation that they had is permittable or permissible and meets the development standards for multifamily parking. I'm trying to think of what else we need to cover. Oh, the project had a lot of Historic Landmarks Commission review. The project is on the Historic Resources Inventory. The commission declined to designate the property as historic, but it's it was placed on the Historic Resources Inventory, so it remains under the purview of the HLC. And they spent a tremendous amount of time on this. They had not only the four hearings with the meeting minutes attached to the staff report, but they also conducted 2 site visits. The first one was kind of an orientation and overview site visit, and then they reviewed and commented on that in a hearing. And then to address the miscellaneous accessory buildings that had various styles and various quality of construction, et cetera, ranging from quite nice architecture to just kind of dressed up shipping container. The second site visit was focused on gaining an understanding of the accessory buildings and how they might be made to comply with the applicable design guidelines, and also to give consideration to the historic nature of the property. So yes, we've spent a lot of time on this application, and I think we're finally here today recommending approval of it. I think that's about all I can think of. I'm certainly here for questions. I know the applicant has a very thorough presentation to make.
Great, thank you, Mr. Baumann, I appreciate it. And I'm just gonna ask, I'm hearing some background noise. I don't see anyone's mics on, but if you're joining us by phone and you're not participating, please make sure that you're muted so we don't pick up background noise. And now I'd like to ask the applicants, Ms. Elledge and Mr. Andrulaitis, if you'd like to come on and introduce yourselves and take us through the project.
Good morning, Ms. Kokinda. I'll wait for Joe to pop up here. I don't see him yet. My name is Suzanne Elledge, and I'm representing all the owners of El Rancho Hacienda. And there's Joe.
Morning.
Morning.
Morning. I'd like to thank Mr. Baumann for the comprehensive report that he issued for this project and his overview that he just provided. We've worked very closely with staff, as he indicated, and with HLC over the last 18 months to propose a project that is supportable by staff and HLC, and we've appreciated the guidance and support that we've received from them. We submitted a detailed letter, I'm sure that you have reviewed it, that explains the proposal and the rationale for our requests. So we're just going to highlight some primary points in this presentation. Joe will walk through the site plan to generally summarize what's happening at each of the cottage locations, which we will reference by address, individual addresses. And then I'll do a brief wrap up after that. I just want to say that the owners and applicants have been very responsive to staff concerns and HLC comments. And while some of the decisions have not been easy, like the partial demo and rebuild of 2 of the cottages, the project as currently proposed is a balanced and reasonable approach to legalizing the unpermitted work that's taken place over the last 60 years. So as Mr. Baumann mentioned, it's a very unusual property, and it has an unusual and unique permit history that does date back to the 1940s. And this is what has led to its legal nonconforming status and the implications and related limitations that such a designation implies. But despite these challenges, the existing development of cottages and outbuildings is charming and relatively modest in size, and facilitates affordable and functional homes for families. The site's surrounded by other residential development and almost entirely screened from view, with the structures sort of clustered near the northern property line of a 4.5-acre site, which is also, I think, wholly compatible with the surrounding neighborhood. So I'm going to turn it over to Joe, who will walk through the site plan, as I said, and then I'd like to make a few comments when he's finished. Thank you.
Good morning. It's Joe Andrulaitis with Andrulaitis Mixon Architects. We can stay on this sheet and zoom in on 469, which is on the very left. you zoom out just a little bit to show the accessory structures? Okay, that works. So 469 is the unit furthest to the west. I'll start from the west and work towards the east. 469 has as-built, an unpermitted addition on the north side of the property that was built over the side yard setback. And that is noted in the dashed dark line on the north side of the property. So that area is proposed to be removed. The single hatched area are proposed unpermitted as-built additions that exist now. And then the double hatch, the cross hatched area is representative of the area that's being added to make up for the area that's being removed on the north side of the property. The two existing accessory structures for this address are the office to the left and the shed on the right. Those are proposed to remain in place, but to be remodeled. And if need be, we can go through the changes to each accessory structure at the end of the presentation. If we move over to 473. So similar to 469, this cottage had an addition made on the north side of the property. A portion of the northwest corner was built over the side yard setback. That area is being removed and is noted as a dashed dark line. There's a portion in the middle part of the north side of the house that encroaches 11 inches over the side yard setback, which we are proposing to remain. And then the single hatched area is the area that is an unpermitted addition that we're asked to be permitted. And then the crossed hatched area are the areas that are being proposed to make up for the area that's being lost. To the left is a laundry room that was built in the side yard setback, and that is going to be significantly reduced to comply with the setback requirement. And then to the south you can move down to the south a little bit. There are 3 accessory structures related to this address. The first one is a shed that's going to be removed and rebuilt at the 485 address. That's the furthest southern one. The second one, shed number 1, is to remain, and then the art studio, 473 art studio, is to remain as well. Move on to the next address. Uh, 477 has the single hatch, represents areas that are unpermitted additions that we're proposing to be as-built permitted. This particular address has 1 accessory structure, which is being proposed to be removed and rebuilt at a location further west, so that's not in front of the house. The area of those structures will remain the same. Move on to the next. Um, 481 has unpermitted additions on the northeast side and on the west side. And it has 2 accessory structures, an office on the west side, and then a shed further down south. The office is going to be attached with a roof element to the existing house, but still being considered an accessory structure because there's no shared wall between the two. 485. 485 is the only cottage that remains without any addition being done to it, except for the conversion of the garage. The shed that was removed at 473, that area is being added and relocated as a shed for this address 485, and it's shown with the red outline and the cross hatching on the west side of this address. In between 485 and 49 is an existing wash house that was permitted as part of the original project. 489 has unpermitted additions on the east and west side. And this particular address had an addition that was located over the sewer line easement that's since been removed. And it also has an accessory structure, an office on the south side that is proposed to remain. And for the last address, 493, we can move over a little bit. 493 has some unpermitted additions on the north side, and then it has 3 accessory structures. One of those, shed number 2, is located over the existing sewer easement. That is going to be removed and relocated towards the north or the southwest corner of the property. The office is to remain, and then there's a small shed on the south or northeast side of the property that is to remain. All the plans show the 2 compliant parking spaces for the multifamily parking requirements. All the driveways were dimensioned to comply with and shown to comply with fire department standards. And I think that covers it in general. If you want me to get into more detail for any particular address, just let me know. We do have those sheets in the rest of the submittal set.
Okay, thank you. Does that conclude your presentation for now?
Yes.
Okay. So for the moment.
I did
go
want
ahead.
to add a wrap up
Please,
if I
go ahead.
could, Ms. Cookinda.
Please do.
And
Go
then,
ahead.
yes, please, I'm sure you have questions. I likely do. It takes quite a while to get your arms around this project, which has some complexity to it. But I did just want to briefly comment on each of the requests. So the lot area modification, the origin of having 7 cottages on a single parcel was approved by the city 75 years ago. And the parcel size was also approved by the city in a subdivision that reduced the original parcel size of 12 acres down to 4.5 acres during a subdivision map that was approved in 1957. And so this longstanding history fully supports the current request and essentially asks the city to formally acknowledge these previous land use decisions and approve a lot area modification for this property. The setback encroachment at 473, that 11-inch load-bearing wall that is in the side yard setback, it is minor. It represents 31 square feet. We are removing the larger encroachment at that residence at 473. The setback encroachments existed for more than 40 years. It has been built in compliance with the building code. It's aesthetically in keeping with the architectural style of the original residence. And it doesn't result in any adverse environmental impacts and doesn't affect the adjoining property, which the residence on the adjoining property to the north is about 75 feet away from the property line. So removing that 11-inch portion of and having it be a load-bearing wall is really an unreasonable hardship, I think, in cost and in practicality, considering the small benefit that the correction makes. So we are requesting that setback encroachment. And then the third action that you're being asked to take regarding the alternative open yard design, I think your visit to the site and anybody visiting the site, what that reveals is that in addition to some small fenced areas that some of the cottages enjoy that secure their gardens and other outdoor space, there's a very generous amount of common open space that the residents enjoy, especially on the north side of the access drive. And this configuration far exceeds minimum requirements. It dates back to the 1940s and has served the owners well since then. So just in closing, El Rancho Hacienda, I believe, is a very special enclave of cottages where long-term residents have fostered a close-knit community while also creating an idyllic and relatively affordable Santa Barbara lifestyle that they seek to preserve and protect. So on behalf of the applicants and the project team, we're grateful for your consideration and respectfully request your approval. And again, we understand there's a lot of complexity here in details. We've tried to hit the highlights, but would be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you both for your presentation. And I'm going to have questions, but first I'm going to open it up to public comment. So if you all don't mind turning off your webcams and muting yourselves. And once I close public comment, I'll ask you both to join us again, and Mr. Baumann as well. But now I'm going to open up public comment for 469 through 493 West Mountain Drive. If you wish to speak on this item, please raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon on your GoToWebinar control panel. A raised hand is indicated by a red arrow pointing down, and you'll have 2 minutes to speak when it's your turn. And at the moment, I do not see anyone raising their hand. I just want to comment that Ms. Gu, the Commission Secretary, is having issues with her audio, but she has informed me that she did not receive any public comment on this item as of today. So I still don't see any raised hands. So I can go ahead and close public comment on this item and then ask our applicants and Mr. Baumann to join us again. Thank you. So this is, I mean, it's really such a massive undertaking, kind of a massive research project, and trying to come up with what's the best path forward given the situation. And I guess I'm going to start with you, Mr. Baumann. I just would love to hear about the pre-application review team, the PRT review, and the other options that you evaluated for this, and how you landed on the lot area modification.
Yes, Ms. Kenda, it really was a process of elimination. The lot area modification was the only one that really worked. The land is not big enough to subdivide for individual lots for the houses because it's in the zone that requires 1 acre per dwelling unit. We looked at planned residential developments and planned unit developments, and those again require that same amount of conforming lot area per density for general plan conformance to the 1 acre per dwelling density. Condominiums are not allowed in single family zone. So basically that left us with the lot area modification, and it seemed to be reasonable because lot area modifications are sometimes used for to add density for affordable dwelling units. So it seemed reasonable to apply that to allow additional floor area for existing units that are non-conforming to density.
Good deal. Thank you so much. And I guess I'm just curious about, I'm going to transition to Suzanne or Joe. And again, I just want to share that that Ms. Elledge had mentioned this, that I did have a chance to go out on site, and it kind of brings the entire plan together when you're able to walk on site and understand kind of the circumstances, the existing development, what was permitted, what type, like the specific allowances they're asking, the modifications for, and changes from zoning, what's being asked. And you begin to see kind of systematically how this project has been approached to kind of figuring out what's the best permitting path. And I mean, that was really illuminating for me. So I understand kind of what's being proposed and what's where things are moving. I do have some questions. I'm just curious in terms of the laundry area. So there's the permitted wash house, but I know that this one area of the laundry between 469 and 473, portions of it are proposed to be removed. So where's the other existing laundry on site, and what are you planning to do for these residences for that?
Thank you, Ms. Kokinda. I'll just respond. Yes, so the laundry room that you're referring to between 469 and 473 is actually an outbuilding to 473. And other people have their laundry facilities within each of their cottages. At the time that the wash house was approved, which is the structure between 485, I'm trying to see the address from here. Yeah, right there, the red. That one was actually built to serve the entire development. The cottages were built in 46 with the hopes of a dude ranch being operated on the site. And that never really came to pass. They pretty much went directly to residential use as we understand it. And in the early 50s, the wash house was built to serve all of the cottages. But subsequently, I think that each of the cottages has their own laundry facilities within them.
Okay, thank you. And I was going to ask, I understand that, and this might be a question for Mr. Andrulaitis, but going back to the office all the way to the left, for 469, that one you had mentioned, in terms of trying to identify what kind of building code standards would be in place. You said that this one is going to be perhaps the most difficult, or maybe in terms of getting it permitted up to making sure it's up to code.
Yeah, the main issue on that one is actually high fire requirements because it has wood shingle siding. So it's likely, we haven't crossed this road yet, but it's likely that the fire department's not going to allow the wood siding. And we'll have to meet the high fire requirements for that particular structure. So that will have to be removed and replaced. And then the roof is just asphalt roofing. So that'll get a tile roof. And then probably most of the windows will have to be replaced to meet high fire requirements. Okay.
But I just was curious because I didn't know to what extent the challenges of that, if it would need to be completely removed, and if you would plan to rebuild entirely, or if it would just be an envelope change based on requirements of the fire department. So then my other questions really had to do with, it's, again, a lot of this, most of my questions were answered at the site visit in terms of just understanding what's being asked, I think. So I don't have a ton at this point because I have a pretty good sense of what's happening. I think it might be helpful just if we could go to the sewer easement and help people understand how, just a little bit more about what's remaining, what's been removed, in order to clear that area for the city's easement. So if we could zoom in on that area. Thanks, Will.
Perhaps I'll answer that question, and then if Joe has anything to add, he can. So you see the easement running between 489 and 493 in sort of the diagonal direction there. And 489, the southeast corner of the building, you can see there's a notch there. That is showing what the cottage looks like now. It was recently that notch that you see there didn't used to be there. The building actually filled in that corner. And through a separate building permit, that part was removed because it did encroach into the sewer easement. And that is actually the fact that it encroached in the sewer easement is what has launched this whole project. Discovering that the cottage had an encroachment led to understanding that other additions had happened on the site. So this is now resolved. You might see that there's a corner of the building that appears to continue to be within the easement. And Public Works has looked at this with us, and the sewer line itself has been surveyed that exists within the easement. And that corner that's just touching into the easement is more than 5 feet away from the actual sewer line. And so Public Works is satisfied that this small corner that remains in the easement can remain without any interference to the sewer line. And they're supportive of that.
Thank you for that explanation. I appreciate that. And yeah, I just wanted to have that on record as for anybody watching. So I have more comments now, so I can just kind of go through my thinking on this because we'll kind of get through it. I just want to say how much I appreciate that this project went through PRT, which stands for Project Review Team. So again, for any neighbors watching, what that means is it's before a formal application is filed, that they want, in order to understand what's the best permitting process and what would be supported by staff, and to get everyone on the land development team, which includes planning, building and safety, public works, which includes transportation and engineering, and all the sewer easement items, as well as the fire department. All of these, the entire land development team has an opportunity to look at a proposal or a concept before it actually goes. And this is, again, I think that this project really benefited from having that type of review, because as I kind of have read through staff's report, Mr. Bauman's report, and reading the materials, there are many decisions and items that were identified to look at what the best alternative, or what are all the options on the table to permit something like this, and to identify like what staff could be supportive of, what works with our zoning ordinance, and what's the most palatable given other comments. So we didn't have any public comment for this for the staff hearing officer, but there were public comments submitted to the Historic Landmarks Commission in terms of some of the encroachments in the setback and the roof, and kind of consistent design consistency amongst the things, and just having general concerns about having permitted items, to have the structures that did not have the benefits of permits to be permitted. So much of that has already been addressed by the Historic Landmarks Commission. They too went out on site 2 times, first to look at the main, the residences, and then secondly to look at the accessory structures. So my purview is just the lot area modification and interior setback modification and alternative open yard design. So I just want to commend the efforts of the project review team and the applicants responding to staff's comments, and assuring neighbors that this has been vetted, kind of already had a lot of preliminary vetting to even get to this particular hearing.
Ms. Kikinda?
Yes.
Excuse me. Following your comments for the benefit of the public, one other, I'd like to offer some input on staff supportability of the lot area modification and how we got to that in terms of the quantity of unpermitted improvements that are being requested. There's 6,000, in our project description, 6,079 square feet of development was originally permitted. And the request is to add to that 6,290 square feet. That reflects the current proposal, but it's pretty similar, very similar to what was as-built. So we've got a lot of as-built floor area on this site, and staff's take on that was it's really a design review question. So we deferred largely to the design review body, which ended up being the Historic Landmarks Commission. And that is to a significant degree what they were doing at their site visit, just observing the quantity of floor area on the lot and deciding that it was appropriate. And, you know, just from an aesthetic point of view, but also from the historic resource point of view, that all these additions and accessory buildings and just the quantity of floor area was supported by the HLC. So staff, that's the reason for staff support of the quantity of additional floor area being requested. So I just wanted to
Ms.
mention that for the benefit of the public also.
Thank you. I'm very pleased that you added that comment. Thank you for doing so. So, and yes, I do want to just comment the amount of legwork that the Historic Landmarks Commission has done to help staff come up with that reasonable support and suggestions for, you know, what's appropriate and what's consistent and what would match the historic nature of those structures. And, you know, going back to the history of this and kind of being a kind of more of a communal space, just even the previous decision-making decades ago, what was permitted on site was really small. And if this was intended to be for families to have anywhere like a little over 600 square feet, we can tell, like, you know, that is just so small. So I understand that the challenge for the owners here and even the applicants in trying to permit this is, and over time, how this has evolved, because that's just, it's the not being able to go beyond that based on a decision from the 60s made it really difficult to really function, I think, more in the way that it was intended to function, perhaps when it was initially created. So, you know, we're certainly not supportive of as-built or unpermitted development, but again, appreciating that this is at least brought us to this point to where we can try to correct that and make sure that everything is up to code and satisfy, you know, kind of relieve the owners of their burden of having unpermitted work and the neighbors as well, to make sure that everything's done safely with coordinated effort from the city. So I'm just going to go through this one by one. So with let me get myself organized. So in terms of the lot area modification, I can go ahead and make the finding that it's consistent with the general purpose and intent of the zoning ordinance, and specific for the purpose of the RS1A zoning district. And it's necessary to secure an appropriate improvement on the lot. This is, like I said, this is a really unique property. It has more of a communal, like it was developed with more of a communal aspect in mind. And we certainly, with the HLC support and staff support, I agree that this, the additional floor area on site, all the unpermitted work that is proposed to be permitted, and the proposed alterations to the existing site and all the different units are appropriate improvements on the lot as it's described in the staff report. And what's the layout, I mean, it's kind of, first of all, it's kind of tucked behind Mountain Drive, and there's a whole berm. It's kind of this little, it's nestled in this little cove almost. So I don't anticipate there being any major visibility issues from the street or from the surrounding neighbors. I don't think there are going to be any privacy issues there. So I'm supportive of the design as proposed and the floor area as it's situated. For the interior setback modification, which is, if you could take us back to the left I think based on the applicant's work with our project review team and the preliminary work and making the decision to remove the large portion of 469 Mountain Drive, I think that was an appropriate design decision. And I also am looking at what is being proposed that's still in the setback is that 11-inch encroachment. And that's such a small area, and I think it would be unreasonable to tear out that entire portion of load-bearing wall for such a minimal change to the setback that I'm supportive of the interior setback modification for that portion so that it would not need to be demolished and then rebuilt for such minimal, you wouldn't gain much from having that wall being moved. So I can make the finding that the interior setback modification is consistent with the general purposes of the zoning ordinance and the specific purposes of the RS1A zoning district. Like I said, it's really to prevent an unreasonable hardship based on that, the physical characteristics and having that existing wall there. The encroachment is minimal. And again, demolition seems unreasonable based on the current configuration and that the way that the design is proposed, that they're actually removing a significant portion of the area that is in the setback. So I think that's a good, I think it's a perfectly acceptable and supportable consideration for the site. And then lastly is the alternative open yard design. It is a little bit bizarre that we're using multi-unit standards, and especially given this site that is just really massive, that there is plenty of open yard, that I'm supportive of the alternative open yard design standard in terms of the circulation and amenities. Again, this project is being reviewed by the Historic Landmarks Commission in terms of the appropriateness of the design of the accessory structures and the location. And I'm certainly supportive of continued communal use for this site as it was initially intended to be. And I feel like seeing how the site works and how it's proposed, it's really a unique situation. I've certainly, in all the projects that I've seen in Santa Barbara, this by far is one of the most interesting and unique of them all. And am happy to be able to support that particular request as well. And feel like it meets the intention of what our ordinance says, and also is trying to reflect this particular communal nature of what it was initially set out to be. So my approval does come with the conditions of the development limitation, and I just would like to ask Ms. Elledge that do the owners understand what this decision means in terms of the development limitations at this point?
Yes, Ms. Kokinda, they do. This has been something that staff has indicated from the beginning of the process during the PRT and forward. And what we understand is that there is that condition that limits the square footage. And should anyone in the future ever decide that they want to request something in addition to that, they would have to go through this very same process of requesting a lot area modification or avenue that might be available to them. But we understand that they understand the condition of approval and accept it.
Mm-hmm. And I think, and so then there's also the unanticipated archaeological resources contractor notification, which is fairly standard for a project. Yeah. So yeah, I just would like to say that, this was, I feel comfortable being able to approve the lot area modification because, again, what was initially permitted was so small. And to think of what's consistent in the surrounding neighborhood of other residences. So in terms of the size, I think the HLC has helped us determine or being supportive of the type of floor area that's being proposed, but also think that, you know, where they've landed now and what this is, what the proposal is, it seems like a reasonable request for floor area. And I hope we don't have to see any projects in the future. I hope this will suffice for many years to come in that regard. So that is my decision. And again, a thank you to staff on the land development team and to the applicants and the neighbors. I understand, you know, I hope many of their concerns about roofing and skylight that will all be addressed through the historic landmarks decision-making process. Yes, I just appreciate all the work that went into doing this, and I hope that the residents can feel some relief moving forward. And I thank you so much, and I'm going to announce the appeal period. So if anyone disagrees with this decision, you are more than welcome to submit an appeal within 10 calendar days of this hearing, and that will be taken up by the Planning Commission, and we have the information on the screen if you wish to do so. And again, thank you to both the applicants and staff.
Thank you very much, Ms. Kokinda and Mr. Bauman. We really appreciate the consideration and all of the guidance along the way. Thank you.
Excellent.
Thanks, guys.
Right.
So that covers the meeting, the staff hearing officer meeting for November 17th. I'm going to go ahead and adjourn this meeting. Thank you.